Hey, welcome to the most difficult tarmac event in Dirt Rally 3. We are in France, to be more specific in Mediterranean France, and we are driving on narrow tarmac mountain roads. You'll encounter narrow villages, big cliffs and hidden hairpins. What? This still describes two different rallies in the game? Okay, well, how about we are on an island? Now it should be clear. Welcome to and on Corsica. For this rally, I recommend the stage Montecinto for tuning setup here. It is half the total length, but due to some high-speed sections, it takes less time than you might think. And I found this stage to be the best suited for all the different challenges of Corsica. First, it starts with a downhill section and many hairpins, ideal to find a good setup for stable high-speed braking. Then it follows with high-speed bumpy sections, giving your car's suspension a proper punishment, trying to throw you off the road all the time. After that, it climbs the side of the cliff with many blind, treacherous turns, training your senses to the pacing of Corsica. And finally, it finishes in the tiny mountain village with a very narrow technical run to the finish. As a vehicle, I wanted to pick something French, maybe Citroën, though I found the Citroëns have such poor visibility from cockpit that would make for a bad visual to convey the driving. So it ended up being the Peugeot you see here. Let's head into its setup. Alignment is default as usual. Also gears are default as well. You might max the gears on one or two straights. But with so many sharp hairpins and the general bumpiness, I don't see the value to sacrifice acceleration for speed. Now for the brakes. I lowered the strength to make it less likely for locking up the wheels and also shifted the balance slightly more to the rear to have more control under downhill braking. Watch the Mexico guide for technical in-depth. For the differentials, just about open them up all a bit more. There is almost no drifting or sliding here, at least not on purpose, so you rather want good power in the corners. Now for the suspension. My goal was to make the car tolerant to some of the roadside rocks and to the bumps. So I actually raised the suspension up a bit and made the springs slightly softer than default. Also, I lowered the anti-roll bar strength, so that impacts on one wheel don't unsettle the whole car. Yet, take a look at the front-rear difference. I lowered the rear anti-roll bars much more. The Peugeot was very snappy when you made slight mistakes and tried to spin out of control. A front-biased anti-roll bar difference makes it more understeery and therefore more stable to control. Finally, remember here that the Peugeot comes with a default difference between front and rear spring strength. I assume the car is much heavier in the front. But we need to know this for setting up the dampers. Here you see a similar strategy as in Croatia. Balanced dampers, but very soft fast bumps, combined with a high activation threshold for them. This absorbs sudden rocks, but keeps the car planted on smooth tarmac. Take notice of the slight difference front and rear. This accounts for the difference in spring strength, to make the compression more or less synchronous between front and rear. Take a look at the Kenya guide for technical in-depth of an asymmetric setup. That's it. Less snappy under oversteer, more stable and controllable for downhill braking, absorbing suspension for all the roadside things, and generally more suspension movement for the most bumpy tarmac. For credibility, with this setup I managed to get a top 20 global time here. But being totally honest here, it involved many more crashes than I want to admit. Not really to improve any time, but just to get a clean run to the finish. And still, my run you see here, the top 20 time, still had a countable number of mistakes, scratches and almost crashing moments. This rally is really a love-hate relationship for me. I like that it exists, that we have this kind of tarmac rally in the game. Fast, very bumpy, very technical at places, very different to other tarmac rallies. This captures a challenge that exists in some real rallies. But I personally hate it. I hate driving it. It feels like bull riding, like it wants to throw you off the mountain and end the rally, like it wants you to crash into a fence, rock or house. I can never get into a proper driving flow here. And that is the core difference to other difficult rallies. Mexico, Greece, Monte, Norway, Kenya, all very difficult. But in all of those, I can, if I have a good day, find a driving rhythm that flows. Not here on Corsica. Great that it exists, not great when it comes up in a club. By the way, if you look for a club with hardcore damage and heavy track degradation, I'll put a link in the description. Now, with that disclaimer of difficulty out of the way, let's talk about actually driving here in Corsica. One skill that helps, at least if you drive without ABS, is similar to trail braking, like easing off a brake. The pressure you can apply to brakes is higher when you are going faster, because the downforce of the car increases the actual grip of the tires as it pushes the car down into the asphalt. This means for a good high-speed brake, you step on the pedal very hard and then ease off the slower you get. Perfectly done, you should always be on the edge of locking up. This is especially useful on downhill sections or at the end of fast sections. And you can train this right at the beginning of the recommended stage here. Another tip for driving is to be very cautious on the road edges. With the shown setup you can drive across some of the rocks, but not all, and not across bridge walls or across a boulder. There are many places where Corsica just completely takes your car and throws it somewhere else. So best to be cautious around those edges. For all those hairpins, remember what I already said in the Croatia guide. No drifting. It is fastest on tarmac to just follow the road. You have enough grip for that. It doesn't look as cool, but it is quicker. The only hairpins where I would use the handbrake and kind of drift are those acute hairpin callouts. Those are so tight that you basically stop anyway, so it becomes quicker to point the car in the X direction immediately. But on this whole 15-kilometer stage, this only applies for one single corner. The final tip I would give for driving here is maybe the most important for Corsica. Finish. Do not try to be fast. Do not try to be on the quickest line. Just drive on a low-risk line and finish the stages. If the car feels insecure, brake and go slower. If the corner is blind, don't trust your co-pilot and go slower. My strategy for a rally in Corsica is to count on others' mistakes. Your competition will probably make mistakes somewhere, somehow, maybe even very damaging or rally ending. So, as long as you get to the finishes in one piece at a somewhat fluent pace, you actually have a good chance for a solid result. This concludes the most difficult tarmac rally guide. I hope it was somewhat helpful and that you can score better results here in the future. The remaining surface now is frozen water. So up next we will head to the most difficult snow rally, Norway. Until next time, tranquil madness.